Well, I think we can probably get started. The thing up. So can I start by getting a volunteer to take some notes for us?
I guess I can try.
Was that Eric?
Yep.
You're very quiet, Eric. I don't know if your mic is down.
Okay. Is it this one?
Thank you for taking notes. I'll get us started. I want to talk a little bit about just checking in on some release stuff. So yeah, we released Calico 3.15.0 on June 19th, so a couple weeks ago. That had all the stuff that we kind of talked about the last meeting, but to summarize, we GA'd our wireguard encryption support. We introduced a procedure for migrating data stores from etcd to using the Kubernetes API. And we started pushing out the operator install to more platforms. So specifically, we updated the quick start guide in the documentation to use the operator install method. As well as a whole bunch of other stuff. We introduced OpenStack usuri support, and yeah, a number of bug fixes and smaller enhancements as well. There was one known issue with that release that we discovered shortly after cutting it, specifically around service advertisement. So there's a bug fix that went into that release that was intended to mitigate some routing loop scenarios when you've got service IP address advertisement enabled. And that fix actually introduced another slightly more serious bug. So we have since reverted that change and cut a Calico 3.15.1 this past Monday. So that's one to be aware of. If you are using service advertisement, you should skip over 3.15.0. I think that's everything there's to say about 3.15. And so 3.16 is on its way. We're currently looking at 3.16 in mid-August. So at a high level, the stuff we're looking at there, we want to introduce automatic detection of MTU so that you don't need to set that explicitly, and we can detect that based off of your host configuration. Support for setting PGP community strings on certain prefixes. And a number of cleanups around our base images, trying to move the remaining images towards Scratch. I think the other really exciting thing in 3.16 is we're hoping to get the eBPF data plane to GA status. Shaun's kind of leading that effort, so I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about what's involved there.
Yeah, sure. So we had in the last release, we still called it a tech preview. It had a number of known issues, so including some security holes that we hadn't plugged yet. So we've we're working through that tech debt and kind of hardening it up, testing it in more scenarios, more platforms, and yeah, just generally kind of beefing it up and making it ready for GA.
Cool. Thanks, Shaun. Eric, you want to talk to us a little bit about what's going on in operator land?
Sure. Not too much. I mean, as far as what the updates that have gone in, just a couple things we've added for the. If you're familiar with operator, the installation resource, we've added resource requests and limits. So those can be configured for the 3 components that are controlled by the installation resource, which is Typha, Node, and Kube controllers. I think that was added. Yeah, that was added for 3.15. And we also switched the image references back to tags. We were trying out what are they called? Like the digests or shot. I don't forget the exact name for it, but those are generated on the server side, and they aren't always the same on all servers. So that didn't work well when we're compiling it in those versions. So we've switched back to tags. We may add a feature in the future to be able to, I guess, set or override those. But that's not something we're currently working on. Yeah. So, and I think that was, I'm not sure if that was actually 3.15. That might have already been in for 3.14, the release that was done for 3.14. I don't remember. Yeah. I guess upcoming stuff for the operator, we're working on improving, I would say, migration stuff from manifest, but that'll probably take a bit because there's a lot behind that. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I've got for operator right now.
Thanks, Eric.
Yep.
Let's see, Alex, I think you wanted to say a couple words about VPP.
Yeah, excited to announce that the work being done by the Calico VPP team, which was previously outside of the Project Calico tree, has now moved under the Project Calico umbrella as a project in incubation status, and the team working on that are making good progress in terms of their velocity. I don't know if there's a couple on the call today. I don't know if any of you want to give an update on what's changed since you last talked about it here.
Hey everyone, yeah, thanks Alex. This is Alex from the Calico VPP team. So yeah, thank you for bringing us into the official Project Calico organization on GitHub. We're really happy to be there. Looking forward to where this will go. Regarding the updates on our side, so we've been working on a few things. We are in the process of finishing the update to Calico 3.15 by default, which will allow us to use the upstream CNI. And also bring the latest bug fixes that you made. We are also currently working on adaptive mode for VPP. So what we call adaptive mode is basically a VPP behavior where it will not consume 100% of CPU all the time, but it will instead adjust the CPU consumption to the current load, which is fairly interesting properties in container environments where you don't all the time have a lot of traffic. We are also changing a bit the network model of the containers. So currently they are using tab interfaces, which are layer 2, but this brings a bit of unnecessary complexity with static layer 2 configuration. So we are moving to turn interfaces, which are layer 3, which removes all the static ARP entries, for instance, that we are setting up. So this is going to give us a bit of a cleaner setup. We're also making a bit of progress on the IPsec side of things. Actually, there was an Intel contribution to VPP that greatly improved that throughput that we can achieve on the single IPsec tunnels. So the goal is eventually to be able to remove the bit of a hackish solution that we did that uses several tunnels between each pair of nodes in the cluster. And this will also allow a single TCP connection to reach very high throughputs between two pods. So we're looking forward to that. And finally, we've made some progress on the services implementation as well. And maybe Nathan can tell you a bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So the main points there are we finished the node ports implementation we were missing last time. And we should be starting fairly soon to add source netting for outgoing connections. That we still need to have the complete picture on the service side. And that's pretty much it, I think. For
did you find the code that we pulled in to pull in kubeproxy into Felix? So Felix has a kubeproxy subsystem now that you can probably piggyback on. So we added that for the BPF data plane, but it probably gives you the same information that you need for VPP or what have you.
I'm not sure. I completely. So we've been doing our own implementation for the service side. So we are not relying on proxy anymore, and could do this, but as VPP land and Linux are quite separated, it might brings additional complexity, but might be worth considering.
In BPF land, we have an implementation of services and node ports and all that stuff as well, and that's all in BPF. Okay. So we have to program the data plane ourselves, so we had to take on some of kubeproxy's calculation responsibility. So that piece of code you could probably leverage.
Okay.
That's interesting. So, yeah, is this exposed in the data plane API of Felix, or is it a separate API you're using to program your BPF?
At the moment, we just run it in parallel. So we run Felix's data plane, and then we also spin up kubeproxy's business logic. So we just import it from the kubeproxy repo, and then we just run the two side by side in the same process. But then we capture the output of its resolution loop and use that to program the BPF data plane.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, we tried to import as much code as we could rather than reworking it, because then it's easier to keep up with changes from upstream, and like we have no desire to reinvent the wheel, and unless there's some need for it.
Yeah, makes sense. We'll take a look at that, see if we can reuse some parts. Thanks. That's it. Any other questions for the VPP stuff?
No, just a comment saying that that's really awesome. That's a lot of stuff. You guys are moving fast.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think that was it for check-ins and whatnot. Were there any other things people wanted to say? If not, we can talk about some hot issues. I have only one that I wanted to bring up, but and I've already kind of talked about it a little bit, but just wanted to kind of reiterate the service advertisement issue that we discovered in 3.15.0. So 3.15.0 is the only affected release for that. So as long as you're not using 3.15.0 with service advertisement, you're all good. Yeah, I think that's all I really had to say about that. I talked about it a little bit earlier. Anybody else have any other issues they wanted to bring to community's attention? Cool. Guess there are no bugs and we are all done here. In that case, let's hear about some heroes.
Yeah, I'd like to recognize Reza, who's on the call today. So he did a bunch of work in our docs to add support for inline tabs as a general feature that we can use in all of our docs pages, which is super useful and something that we've been thinking of doing for a while. And it'll allow us to keep the docs quite compact when there's, for example, if we want to have instructions for manifest-based installs versus operator-based installs without making the doc twice as long. So that's super cool, and you'll start seeing new docs pages turn up that are leveraging that over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I want to second that. I stumbled upon a page that had those tabs the other day and got really excited because it was something I had always thought we could do, and we just never did. But that's a super cool enhancement.
Hi everyone. So Lars Ekman, I don't think he's on the call today, but he's contributing a feature to Felix that allows you to override the feature detection code in Felix. So the particular use case that he has is to disable one of the features that we detect in IP tables, but he's made it quite a generic feature that we can use to tweak things for a particular environment. So if you're in an environment where we look at the kernel version and we think your kernel doesn't support something, or we look at the IP tables version and we think it doesn't support something because of the version number, you can now override that and try with or without the feature that we think. So if we end up with a feature that is broken, you could use it to sort of disable that feature. And it just seems like quite a useful thing across the board. So the particular use case was to disable the random fully flag on IP tables, because in their particular niche telecom use case, they don't want random source IPs.
Do you mean
Yeah.
source ports or?
Sorry, yeah, random source ports, yeah.
What I don't think I'm familiar with that auto detection code. Is there like other stuff that
it's
we detect today?
mainly it's used for a couple of things. So the code paths that he's changing were the IP tables auto detection code. So we look at the version of IP tables that we're running on, and normally if you're running Calico node in a pod, then it will be the version that we shipped with the pod, and so we always ship a high version so that you get all the features, assuming your kernel supports them. But we check the kernel version and we check the IP tables version, and then have various feature flags for turning on and off things like random fully and whether certain, there's only 3 or 4 of them, but he's made it a generic mechanism. We also have a couple of feature flags in the BPF data plane, which so far he hasn't added, but I was planning that once the code goes in, I'll wire those up so we can override those as well to try it on different kernels. So for example, Red Hat kernels tend to have a lot of backports, so it's quite hard to detect whether a particular feature is valid or not. So it gives us a way of temporarily disabling the feature detection while we try that out, or backing out a feature that we don't want.
Very cool.
Cool. I had a couple heroes that I wanted to mention. I'm not confident on on their name. In GitHub, their user is Mandelsoft. Yui Krueger is my guess on how to say their name. They've added a new interface detection method to filter interfaces with matching by matching to a CIDR. I think that's a nice way to detect IP address. So I think that'll be nice to get that in. I also had a few more minor, smaller change. How about not minor? Smaller changes that it's always nice to see coming in from the community. One was from a GitHub user. I'm sure you're supposed to be able to pronounce this, but it's C6H3UN. Just fixing some RBAC doc rules for etcd v3. It was some stuff we missed when we added some new functionality to kube controller and some data store configuration. So it's good to see that those docs get updated. There's another user, Hacman, that just found that we had some duplicate WireGuard MTU environment variables in, I think, the node daemon set that is submitted a PR for. So it's always nice when we get smaller fixes like that people can probably pretty low-hanging fruit for contributions. So it's always nice to see people take the initiative and do that.
I think Hacman is one of the COPS maintainers. So he found that problem when he was integrating the manifest into COPS. And I think Kubernetes 119 polices the DM files, so it blew up. So it's good of him to contribute that back rather than just filing a bug.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. That was all I had.
Sorry, this is Brad. I'd like to just give a shout out to Shaun. Helped out yesterday via Slack. We had a customer that had actually filled up their etcd data store in Kubernetes, and they shouldn't have been anywhere close from what we could tell. So of course they start pointing at Calico or thinking Calico is doing something. So Shaun was just able to answer a few questions and point us to some other things that we could check or that could be problems. So appreciated the quick help there on Slack. So thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to help.
Awesome. Well, I think we've got a nice demo lined up. Matt has agreed to show us around what a data store migration looks like.
Yep. So yeah, I'm pretty much just going to show kind of the data store migration utility we added in 3.15. And so it pretty much works through Calico Cuddle, and you pretty much only really want to use it if you wanted to move, I guess, all your Calico data from an etcd data store to a Kubernetes data store, kind of without bringing your cluster down throughout the whole thing. So that's pretty much it. So let me share my screen. I want to see that. Okay, so first I'll kind of show what my cluster looks like here. It's pretty simple. Just Calico 3.15 installed with an etcd data store, and I've also added kind of the YowBank stuff, which, if you're familiar with it, is kind of what we've used per past demos, kind of to show off some policies. So it pretty much has an attacker pod that shouldn't be able to access pretty much all of the rest of these secure banking sort of pods and services here. So, and it pretty much also comes with some policies which will pretty much secure those components so that that attacker pod shouldn't have access. So if, for instance, I do look in here, or actually before I do that, let's see. So here are the IPs for that. I go into the attacker pod and try to ping, say, the database. Shouldn't be able to access it because we should have that policy in the way. So everything's working just as we'd expect it to. So now that we can see that, let's start migrating all of that information. So the first thing we're going to want to do is basically lock the data store, and that will just prevent any changes we make to any of the data. We'll prevent that from kind of flowing through to the cluster. So it pretty much keeps the cluster in the same state it was in prior to starting this data store migration. So now that that data store is locked, any changes
that'll stop. Will that stop new pods from being created? Is that?
It will not stop it at the API server, but it will stop it at our CNI plugin. So you're not going to get new IPAM data or workload endpoints or the like. Yeah.
Yeah, it prevents pretty much Calico from, I guess, uptaking any of that new information. So the Calico node pods pretty much won't be able to do any of the, I guess, work that they would need there. So lock the data store. Pretty much now all we need to do is export the information. So it's pretty simple as well. We'll just write that into a file here. So I'll just call it etcd data for now. But pretty much that file shouldn't be edited by hand. It's kind of written in a very specific, I guess, formats for the import later. So that one's simple enough as well. And so now that we've done that, we're pretty much done with the etcd data store. So we'll need to basically move over to the Kubernetes data store. So let's see here. I have the Calico config for that already set up. So I'll just do this real quick. Go. So now we should be able to see that we don't have anything in this data store. Oops. So, yep. So now we're basically on that empty Kubernetes data store. And it's important that it's empty because pretty much the migration, when it does the import, will try to basically make the data store in the exact same state, at least for Calico objects, that the etcd data store was in. So if we go and now import that information, where's my etcd data file? It will now move all of that information that was in the etcd data store. It's also nice because it'll lock your Kubernetes data store as well. And if you do not have, say, the CRDs and everything applied, it'll go ahead and do all of that for you as well. So that's nice. If you had data in there, it'll kind of throw an error and tell you kind of how to kind of remove that information, since we pretty much want all of the Calico data to be basically just what was part of that exported file. So that's done there. So Now we should just quickly check that kind of the information made it over. So there's our network policies. If we look at our IPAM, we can see that that's reflected there as well. So looks like most of the data, or the data itself, has been moved over. So pretty much now we need to just switch our Calico installation to read from this new data. So we will, and to do that, you pretty much need to grab the installation manifest for your Calico installation. In this case, just the Kubernetes Datastore manifest will do. I've already downloaded it, so we'll just apply that real quickly here. And it has the warnings because a lot of the CRDs have already been created as a part of the import step. So now I think we just need to wait until those pods are restarted. So wait for that rolling update to finish. This kube controllers piece here will hang because it's pretty much stating that the data store is locked. So it's going to wait until the data store is unlocked for itself to kind of restart correctly. But all of the Calico node pods should roll out and change.
Shaun, that's kind of the answer to your question about launching new pods while the data store is locked. So it's in container creating because the CNI plugin is rejecting new IPAM requests until it's unlocked.
Could you unlock the Kubernetes data store like at this step? So as soon as the pods come up, they're ready to go, or do you have to wait?
You could, but I think it's probably safer to do it this way. You could do it that way so that it would go as soon as you kind of updated the data store. But it's definitely safer to kind of do it this way first to make sure that everything is kind of running and reading from the same place before you kind of undo it. And especially because I think once you unlock it, there'll be some changes made that are pretty much irreversible at that point. So I think you want to just kind of make sure that everything.
Yeah, thinking about it, you don't want new Calico nodes to come up and start networking pods, because the old Calico nodes won't know about the new pods until they're restarted. I think I'd be tempted to nuke the Calico nodes and just restart them like aggressively, because the old ones are not, they can't do anything, so they're kind of dead in the water.
Yeah.
I think the one caveat with that is like if you care about graceful restart for EGP sessions.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
Okay.
I'd still be tempted.
Yeah, me too.
So yeah, and that's pretty much it. So now all that's left is, as we were kind of chatting about, was just getting that basically just unlocking everything. So now pretty much your cluster is running on the Kubernetes data store. So I guess we can check real quick here. So what I could do is I could delete the policies real quickly here. Oops. So I can delete the policies real quick here, and then we can see that it should be able to uptake those changes. So if I ping in the data store again, it's basically allowed to update it without those policies. So yep, it's able to read from that data store now. So, yeah, that's it. Any questions that we haven't kind of gone through yet?
There's no reason you couldn't add you could enable Typha in your new install too, right? Since you're switching to Kubernetes data store,
yeah,
you could.
Yeah, I think
I don't think you had it running, right?
Yeah, I think the manifest I grabbed didn't have it. Let me see here.
Yeah.
Yeah, the manifest I had didn't have that. It was just a simple one, but there should be no reason that you shouldn't be able to have Typha installed as well.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you, Matt. Any other questions for Matt? Any other general questions for anybody? Excuse me.
I just had a general question on the operator. I know it started out being used for OpenShift, and I know there's been talk about using it for just general clusters, Kubernetes clusters. Is that, I guess, what's the status on that? Is that a high priority thing? Is that just something they're going to do as there's time, or do we have a direction on
that? I would say we kind of have some groundwork to lay before we go before we start going and are supporting too many more platforms, just because the operator kind of has a limited configuration API right now, and so we need to enable more configuration options before we start switching over more of those. And that, we are working on adding some more of those options. So, but we don't really have a timeline yet for when we would be expanding it for open, just any platforms right now. If maybe not super helpful for you, but
No, that makes sense. And it's not a huge high priority for us right now either. I just didn't know where it was sitting, so that helps. So.
Yeah, I guess I would add, like, go ahead, Shaun.
It's fair to say we're actively working on it, though, right? Like that's the quick start has moved over now and fleshing out more of the things. So it's a very active piece of work in our team.
Okay.
Yeah, and one that I think is going to be pretty important too. Like, as time has gone on, the proliferation of different manifests have all kind of diverged, and it's made it a lot harder to know what combinations are tested and supported, and can be expected to have every feature that we support work. So the operator should make that a lot easier to push out a new release. You just bump the operator version, and it's all there and packaged nicely.
Yep.
Like I guess it was who was it, Hacman, that was doing the manifest updates for cops. Like, this is something that I think for him as a maintainer of another installer that uses Calico should make his life a lot easier. Well, I'm fresh out of questions. And it sounds like everybody else is too. So maybe we end a little bit early today and everyone gets a bit over 15 minutes back. Thanks everybody for coming. I think the next one, let me check my calendar. is going to be August 12th. That sound right? Second Wednesday of the month. August 12th. See you guys then.